The Beirut Blast, a time bomb from a decade past.
This poster will discuss the mismanagement in the port of Beirut and how it led to the catastrophe that is now sadly known as the Beirut Blast. It will be presented by the following American University of Beirut environmental health students: myself, Akram Yassin, Ahmed Al Madwahi, Alan Fattah, Karim Kiwan, and Yara Murad. On August 4th, 2020, stored ammonium nitrate in the port of Beirut led to a massive explosion that not only shook most of Lebanon, but also disturbed the Earth's ionosphere. This had devastating effects. Hundreds were killed, thousands were injured, entire areas were demolished, along with many more disastrous effects that will cost billions of dollars to fix. But fixing all this damage is not sufficient if another disaster occurs in the future. Though the blast itself is a major problem, it should not mask the underlying issue, which was and still is the mismanagement of hazardous chemicals and their related facilities. It is evident that this disaster could have been avoided if the government had taken the proper measures ever since the ammonium nitrate arrived at the port back in 2013 to not allow such dangerous chemicals to remain in it in such poor storage conditions and instead stored them in their designated facilities under proper conditions. The facts presented in Table 1 are an approximation of the devastating aftermath effects of the blast. At the very least, 220 people died, 6,500 were injured, and 300,000 were displaced due to their homes being destroyed or significantly damaged. In addition to all the physical impacts, the explosion had social, economic, structural, and environmental impacts, which the World Bank estimated to cost around $4.7 billion, further worsening the country's economy and healthcare structures. Now, my colleague Ahmed Al Madwahi will continue.
Thank you, Akram. As you can see here, a summary of the timeline of events related to the blast could be as follows. In October 2013, a ship carrying ammonium nitrate arrived at the port of Beirut. 2 years later, in October 2015, this ammonium nitrate was then moved from the ship and stored in a warehouse. On October 4th, 2020, the stored ammonium nitrate exploded, causing massive amounts of destruction. About a month after that, on September 10th, a huge fire broke out in the port. Until today, April 2021, investigations are still ongoing as to the exact cause of the explosion and subsequent fire in the port. So, what is going on so horribly in the port that it is deemed a continuous public health threat and a recipe for continuous disasters? Well, first we start with the conditions and location of the ammonium nitrate storage based on speculations by experts, which were then proven by images of Hangar 12 where it was stored. The ammonium nitrate was present in bulk amounts in containers and stacks, which may themselves have been flammable. Considering the huge amount that the chemical was present in, and which was reported in the tons, the space dedicated for its storage is considered confined, which prevents heat from escaping and gases from expanding, resulting in the explosion witnessed. Additionally, the ammonium nitrate was stored for 7 years. That's well enough time for degradation and contamination to occur. The chemical will react violently with various materials, particularly organics such as fuel and oil. While the thermal decomposition temperature of ammonium nitrate is 200 degrees Celsius, the presence of contaminants can significantly reduce this. The ammonium nitrate was also reportedly stored near fireworks or a kind of explosives, which was the main reason that the blast took place, since it was most probably detonated under the presence of a severe heat or shock source and it being exposed to moisture. Ammonium nitrate is a chemical that is produced in the form of little beads, and once these beads absorb water, they can clump up together, fundamentally becoming similar to rock bulks that are very dangerous and can easily trigger an explosion. Finally, storing the chemicals so close to residential areas essentially increased the extent of damage that would have otherwise occurred. Now, my colleague Alan Fattah will continue.
Thank you, Ahmed. It was noted that the ammonium nitrate was not the only hazardous chemical that had been accumulating at the port for a decade. Various other hazardous chemicals had been accumulating during this interval under improper storage conditions. During the cleanup process, the company Combi had been able to locate, clean up, and ship to Germany 52 containers of hazardous chemicals that were stored at the port. 31 of the containers had contained hydrochloric acid, while the remainder of the containers had hazardous chemicals such as hydrofluoric acid, methyl bromide, sulfuric acid, peroacetic acid, and sodium hydroxide. It was also noted that over 1,000 liters of acetone were in storage as well. Moreover, Colby-Lift found that these various chemicals were stored in thin layered containers in open air cargo zones. And as a result of this improper storage, some of the chemicals had already been exposed to one another. We can see that these chemicals were under similar conditions to that of the ammonium nitrate incident, and thus the potential of another chemical disaster may have been bound to happen in the future had the port not been cleaned up. All of these findings reflect on the fact that the Beirut port had been plagued with improper management. Issues of management relate to the improper storage conditions of hazardous chemicals, the lack of enforcement of local legislation, and the disregard for the international guidelines. Moreover, the improper management is also portrayed from the government's lack of competency, inefficiency, and poor transparency of the port's activities. Furthermore, the port's management is also subjected to forms of corruption and manipulation by different powers as a direct consequence of the state of the country. Now, my colleague Karim Kiwan will continue.
Thank you, Alan. The Beirut port explosion is one that could have been easily averted had there been proper fire drills, emergency preparedness plans, and quality control programs. The occurrence of such a blast triggered an investigation that looked into the presence of any regulations and laws which control and oversee the management of dangerous chemicals in the port and other institutions as well. So, first of all, it is the case that we do have a law tailored specifically for the process that should be followed in our ports. There exists clear guidelines to the type of chemicals that can be imported, the requirements needed to be completed before the arrival, the duties of the holding ship at arrival, the handling conditions, labeling, and storage. The most glaring and obvious article in the system of Lebanese ports is Article 121, which specifically states that hazardous substances are subject to the general rules and that dangerous material fall under those rules when dealing with their packing, stacking, and shipping. Additionally, Article 146 of the system, which promulgated more than 50 years ago, also reveals how there are actually laws demanding that several precautions are taken through handling and transport activities. In workplaces, there are also regulations to protect the health and safety of the workers. The Occupational Health and Safety Decree under the Labor Law includes regulations for the proper storage procedure and requirements for chemicals and potentially hazardous substances. Article 50 of this law clearly states how chemicals should be stored in facilities that have fire alarms with walls that are heat resistant and capable of repelling fire. The environmental conditions in which those chemicals must be stored is also regulated, and there is a need for proper cooling and ventilation systems and adequate spacing to avoid tight, compact storage. The decree also states how a specialized emergency team must be available and ready to move in. Moreover, international guidelines were not followed either. Based on the US Occupational Safety and Health Administration, the stored ammonium nitrate should not exceed 55 degrees Celsius, and the amount of stored ammonium nitrate within a building not equipped with an automatic sprinkler system should not exceed 2,500 tons. As we now know, both of these policies were not implemented in the Lebanese port. Also, based on the UK Health and Safety Executive, ammonium nitrate should be stored away from combustible material and contaminants and should be stored away from possible sources of heat, fire, and explosions. These guidelines were also not met in Lebanon. Now, my colleague Yara Murad will continue.
Thank you, Karim. Moving on to the recommendations, the port requires an efficient and modern process for handling and storing of hazardous chemicals. Moreover, the activities of the port should be transparent and have a proper quality control program installed. The enforcement of the existing legislations that regulate the handling of these chemicals must be followed through. Importantly, even with the current mitigative actions being implemented, There should be a plan for emergencies, which accounts and prepares for similar disasters. In addition to that, a body should exist to coordinate and conduct proper needs assessments. Finally, a new port model, which was a suggestion by the World Bank, can be implemented. So, to connect the dots together, after the explosion on August 4th and the fire that followed in September, it is important to question and examine whether or not lessons were learned by us and authorities in order to prevent or mitigate future disasters effectively. The catastrophic effects that resulted from the blast were only a symptom of the true underlying problem: mismanagement. Moving forward, and despite all the socioeconomic challenges that the country is facing, it is crucial to establish a system which prioritizes people's safety and well being to prevent future tragedies from happening again. In conclusion, we have witnessed a number of countries proposing to rebuild the port of Beirut, but it is yet to be seen when these projects will unfold. The reconstruction will initiate an economic boom for the city of Beirut, providing its citizens with hope for a better future. Thank you for your attention, and we hope that you've enjoyed our presentation and benefited from it.